super early morning. I am aware of that. And I know you guys are school leaders, but we will definitely next year when I see all of your beautiful faces, do programming a little bit later in the day so you guys can get some rest. I wanted to, before we welcome up our founders panel to talk about putting policies into practice, share a little bit about my story and how I came into this. Talk about my experience and how I came into the world of education freedom. I often tell people I was thrust into this space. I actually went to a Black-owned school. It wasn't until the sixth grade that I loved education. I grew up in poverty on the east side of Jacksonville, which if anyone knows the community of Jacksonville, Dr. Phyllis does, it's called the urban core. On one side, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium, historic Riverside, which is a higher income, actually, and then the Mayport, where goods come into Jacksonville. And right at the center of that, by all accounts, you would think that this little area would be of a different income bracket. But it's one of the poorest communities in Jacksonville, Florida. And that's where I grew up. Many of my family members did not graduate from high school, have babies as teens, and didn't value education. My mom had me at the age of 16 and dropped out of school. And that was supposed to be my life trajectory. But my godmother saw fit and wanted me to be in a different environment. And the summer before my sixth grade year, I began to live with her permanently. That was one thing that changed. And she enrolled me in her church's school. And when I tell you it was like night and day, I failed the third grade twice. I got into fights at school. I was your problem child, and y'all probably have those kids in your school. No, she's like, no, we don't have those kids. I don't know who you're talking about. But that was me. I had no respect for adults, none. They had disappointed me. When I would come through the classroom in the traditional schools, teachers would sigh when I came through the door, like, here's another one. And that wrecked my self-esteem. That didn't help me to want to be there either. And when the summer before my sixth grade year came, this new private school, we were in uniform from head to toe. When I say head to toe, it was head to toe. We had a beret. We had the bow tie. Of course, shirt, blazer, knee highs, and I had patent leather shoes. It was from head to toe, and it was a culture shock. When I came into this small private school in Jacksonville, I was on defense, to be honest, because before, I wasn't reading on grade level. I would have to defend myself. Students would laugh and pick at me. I was 2 years older than everyone in my class, and none of that happened. Teachers would call on me to read out loud and wouldn't leave. I would leave from me to read. I would be sitting, trying to get through a passage, hyperventilating, crying, because I could not get through it. And this one teacher, she would not leave from me. She would make me continue to read until I got it. And that dedication into my academic success took me from making D's and F's to A's and B's the first 9 weeks. And this was not social promotion. This was what you guys do in many of your school environments of looking and making sure your kids can learn and read. And that was my life. I ended up being the first in my family to graduate from high school. I went on to college, got a graduate degree, and looked around at my community and said, well, I am not that special. Like, I literally am not that smart. Like, it can't be me. Like, it can't just be something so special about Denisha. And that's when I was like, it has to be education. I have younger siblings who dropped out of school. I have my youngest sister failed 3 grade levels, is struggling to graduate. And the one thing that I had that they didn't have was education freedom. They didn't have the opportunity like I had to go to a different school. And I began to think, like, maybe that was it. And the more I interacted with other communities across the country, that was the difference factor. The difference factor was education. And so from the bottom of my heart, because you guys are active, you guys have students actively in your classrooms, thank you on behalf of them, because the difference that the education that you're providing to them, you're creating, I don't want to say me's, but you're impacting students' lives. And one day the students that you guys are serving could have the same story, you know, that they went from this to that. And so thank you. On behalf of them, thank you. And now we'll welcome up our panel of Black school founders who's also doing the work. These champions in education are moving the needle forward in different ways. They've moved past what Bruce was talking about yesterday, being a school founder, but also being an advocate for school choice. And I'm very excited for you guys to hear from them today. Please welcome Paul Dauphin, Shomari James, Principal Mo, who you guys met yesterday, Janelle Wood, and Miss Bernita Bradley.
Thank you, Denisha, and good morning, class. I feel like I'm at in my 8 o'clock class in college many years ago, so hopefully everyone got a good night's sleep. We're going to have some guests that will join us a little bit later on during this program. We'll have students from T.H.R.I.V.E Academy, so looking forward to them. But this whole conference is very touching for me because when I was a kid, and I'm going to age myself a little bit, I grew up in the era of segregation. And in my hometown of Opelousas, Louisiana, they integrated schools, and I got exposed to, I guess you'd call it a founder's experience. They passed the law to integrate schools, and all the white kids in the public school system, their parents took them all out. And overnight, literally overnight, schools were founded for those kids. So when we showed up at public school, black kids, or as we were called back then, colored kids, we had the school to ourselves. But what I realized was that, boy, you know, I'm a kid, and I for the first time, even though I lived in a segregated society, I realized for the first time that these people really don't like us. And they founded schools that were obviously inferior. In fact, within a year, half of those students were back in public schools, back at our sides. And then within 2 years, most of those schools were closed and they were back. So to be with founders, black founders who are founding schools, opening schools for black students, just means a whole lot. So with that, let's meet our champions. Monica Hall, she is founder of T.H.R.I.V.E Academy in Stone Mountain. We were there yesterday, and it was a great visit. Shomari James, co-founder of Equity Now in Maryland, Lanham, Maryland. He's also part of Legends Charter School. He's the founder of Legends. And Bernita Bradley, founder of Engage Detroit Homeschool Co-op in Detroit. And this panel just shows the diversity of the types of schools and the types of education options that we are founding and making available to families and children. So what I'd like to do is start with, just give us a brief story of how you got into where you are now. What made you do this founding experience? Start with you, Bernita.
Yes, so first of all, I didn't come to education. Education came to me. I didn't want to be here with y'all. I was like a parent who dropped my children off at school every day. I was active in the school. I was one of those parents who showed up. My daughter would often be like, Mom, I told them you gonna bring this and that. And I'm like, quit telling them I'm gonna do stuff. Like, I bring you. Like, that's good enough, right? I'm a good parent. But, right, I'm like, I show up. And then a teacher lost my daughter in 2nd grade. And then I showed up. And I was either gonna be doing this interview via jail or I was gonna be doing it up here. But this sporadic thing happened where the principal who loved the community brought me into school and said, Ms. Bradley, we need you here. And I'm like, no, I'm always here. What do you mean? Me and my husband, what do you mean? And she was like, no, I need you to understand what's going on in our school system. So my daughter's school had a school across the street that had closed. That school ended up combining with my daughter's school, which was really a smaller school. The other school was humongous. The teacher that lost my daughter had 36 kids in her class. 7 of them were special needs, and she had no pull-in or pull-out support. She looked at my daughter, this little second grader who was always like the head of the class, right? Like the teacher's pet, like can tell the other kids how to read and all this kind of stuff. She had been in school since 6 months old, like literally school, not early childhood. She looked at her as responsible enough to walk all these yards away from her because she saw my car down yonder somewhere that she thought was my car. So long story short, we found my daughter. I end up being that parent at the school. I stopped doing hair. I was like, okay, y'all, I gotta, be at the school at these times. So I closed my hair salon down certain times a day, and I was at the building. I made sure I was there. So any parent or anybody that came to that building and looked suspicious, I was like, who are you? Yep, who are you? Like, right, baby, where you going? I don't see a parent with you, right? So I became an ally for the school. That becoming an ally for the school became me working for AmeriCorps, became me actually leading an enrollment process for the city of Detroit, me actually training other parents to go into a school and say what a safe and caring environment is. I don't know if you guys know about the A to F grades that Detroit was getting. I was the person who managed that process. Like, all this came from a teacher losing my daughter and me becoming activated. But what happened during the pandemic, I started seeing, like, after all these things we've championed as a parent, like, I helped to stop schools from getting closed in Detroit. And today I can actually say that I wish I had have not helped to stop schools from closing. Because some of those very public schools are failing our children miserably. And during the pandemic, we watched our richest community go home, which is 3 blocks from me, with tools for learning. But our kids did not have tools for learning until May, the end of May. And all they kept telling parents was, be patient. We never been through a pandemic like we had, right? Like we had been through our own personal pandemic and y'all as educators was just living. No, nobody had been through a pandemic. And I saw our public schools literally failing kids even more in a city where only 16% of our children were reading on grade level by 3rd grade before the pandemic. And that was an increase from 2018 when it was 12%. And me as an active parent fighting to champion, fighting to pay off the deficit was literally having parents tap out. And while I'm a proponent for change and choice, I am not a proponent for parents having their kids just sitting at home doing nothing. That's right. So I was like, what do you need to do? They was like, I want to homeschool. People were like, oh, everybody's homeschooling right now. No, they want to homeschool. So what do we need to do? We started getting live chats with parents and some professional homeschool parents, like, what do you want to do? Ask them questions. What do you need to do? Mind you, my daughter had asked me in 5th grade to homeschool her, and I was like, nope, I don't want to be your enemy. We good. Like, no, I'm not about to be that parent, right? Long story short, we started giving parents tools to homeschool and coaching to understand what it looks like to really homeschool and understand the processes. And here we are today. Started out with 12 pilot parents in 2020, and now we have 40 parents and almost 100 students.
Awesome. And I want to introduce, I think I forgot you, Janelle Wood, founder of Black Mothers Forum in Phoenix, Arizona. How'd you get into this? How did this forum get started?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us, Denisha, and thank you for Black Minds Matter. First of all, I want to say that it was God. The Lord led me to this work. I was not looking for this work. Like what my dear sister said, it found me. I was minding my business, and I one day said, I surrender my life to you, Lord. Use me however you want to use me. And he decided he wanted to use me to advocate on behalf of the lives of Black children. This came about in 2014. He brought it to my attention that our Black children were suffering at the hands of police. And so it took another year or two for me to go meet with people, talk to people, and then I started to figure out what needed to happen. I read a book. I was in a book club called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and that's when I learned about this thing called the school-to-prison pipeline. And I said, really? What is going on here? And I have a Black son. And I started to recall all the issues I faced trying to get him through schools in Arizona. Him being labeled, they tried to put him on Ritalin. I had to move him from school to school to find a safe space for him. Little did I know that was setting me up for this work to fight to create safe and supportive learning environments for our Black children, especially our Black sons. And so as I started to grow in this, it started to become more and more apparent, and in 2015, we started having all these shootings. 2016, more shootings, and I had an older woman. Her name was Nellie. Nellie kept saying, I said, Nellie, the Lord is laying it on my heart that I'm supposed to meet with Black mothers. I just don't know what I'm supposed to meet with Black mothers to do. And she said, well, he'll show you. And so I continued to pray on it, and then in July 2016, I called a meeting for August. So happens a Black young man was shot and killed, shot in the back by an off-duty police officer in Tempe. He was mistaken. They said he had stolen something, but he hadn't. And so his mother was on the media, bawling, crying, and the Lord said, that's what I need you to do with Black mothers. I need you to bring them together so they could come together and have a collective voice and to learn how to advocate and articulate the needs of their children to those in authority. So I called us together on August 7th. We came, 40 mothers showed up. We formed the organization. I wasn't looking for the organization. They told me, you're going to lead us. I said, I ain't, okay. And so we formed it. But what brought me to micro schools, what brought us there, is because we kept fighting with school boards, with school districts, with principals, trying to help them. They say they have policies in place to create equity and inclusion within the schools, and yet behavior of the adults was counter, and they did not align to the policies that they said they had in place. And so we got trained by ACLU. We learned how to read data. They taught us how to extrapolate the data that we were seeing in these schools, and we started to look at disproportionate disciplinary practices. We recognized that our Black boys and Black daughters were being pushed out of school. That means suspended and expelled at a higher rate than their white peers. They were being pushed out at 6 to 8 times higher. They were being pushed out more often, and they were being pushed out longer, and their consequences were more significant, which means it was interrupting their educational process. So therefore, regardless of if they were going to the institution, they had access to a good quality education, so their parents thought, but they couldn't benefit from that access because they were sitting in the office all day. Parents didn't know they were sitting in the office all day. Parents thought the children were in class because no one told our children that they were sitting, no one told the parents that their children were sitting in the office all day, till they got suspended. Then when the parent gets to the school to pick them up, because the child has responded to what? Bullying. Bullying is a big issue in Arizona schools. I don't know if it's an issue in all the other schools, but it is in our schools. Our children are name called pretty much all the day long. And they have to sit there and have a teacher tell them, don't be oversensitive. You're taking it too personal. Just shake it off. Develop thick skin in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, in third grade. And so our children decided, well, no one's going to keep me safe. I better fight. And guess what? When we respond, who is going to the office? And who is going to get arrested by the police? Because you know what? They call police on our 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, and they arrest them. And then their parents find out about it as the child is being taken into custody. And then the parent finds out when they get there, oh my goodness, they've been in the office how many times? Oh yeah, your child's been a problem. How come I didn't know that? How come no one contacted me? But now it's suspended. So this is what we dealt with. So we learned how to advocate. We started training parents on how to articulate the needs of their children. We started training children on how to articulate their needs to their parents. We told parents, talk to your child and ask them questions, specific questions every day when you pick them up so you'll know. Make sure you tell them you're not going to get in trouble if you were in the office today, because our children are fearful of disappointing us. So they're not going to tell you they've been in the office, so you wouldn't know. So we started to develop that. Micro schools came about because after I sat in one school board meeting after the other, when school board members were filing their nails, looking at the wall, when I was talking to them about the needs of our children, that's when we decided, okay, they're not serious about trying to create safe and supportive learning environments for our children. And so we started looking in 2019 for another way. Charter schools were too expensive. Homeschool was not an option because many of our parents could not stay home. Bless you that you were able to do that, but many parents couldn't. So we found micro schools. The pandemic accelerated the need for us to go ahead and start them. So we started the micro schools. It didn't just happen because of the pandemic. We were looking already because we said we'll have to show you better than we can tell you how to create a safe and supportive learning environment for our babies. And that's what we did. So we started in January 2021. I wasn't expecting to do that. It just found us. We had 5 families say, we're in. They brought boys. We had a lot of boys start because they needed to be safe, kindergarten through 8th grade. And now today, we have 5 micro schools. We have 2 locations and counting. We have learning guides. Black mothers, black educators came together and said, we're going to do this. 10 student schools, 2 learning guides per school. So each child, we have 1 in 5. 1 learning guide per 5 students for the wraparound service. They are now certified in parenting skills. They're teaching parents how to be better parents. And this is the work that we get to do because our children deserve to live out their God-given purpose, and I'm going to do all that I can do to make sure they get a chance to do so.
Beautiful.
That's my work.
Thank you. And now we're going to move from micro schools to charter. Shomari, tell us how the legends get started.
All right. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite, Denisha. Black Queen energy, just like on this panel right now. My wife came home, who was a reading specialist, to teacher, to assistant principal, to award-winning principal in DCPS. She left DCPS. We started a for-profit organization, and she went around the country helping organizations like Rocket Ship. And she came home and she said, listen, I want to do this for us. We starting a school. I said, happy wife is a happy life, boo. I have no idea what that means, but I have your back. We've been together since high school, almost 30 years now. We will celebrate our 20th year anniversary this year in July. And we have conversations all the time, the parallels between education and engineering. My degree is in industrial engineering, and I have a master's in business, my MBA. So having these conversations, we said, well, how can we create these synergies so we can start a school? She said, I don't really know either, but we're going to figure it out. So we tapped my really good friend from college and her sister, my co-founder who's in the audience, Miss Amina Johnson, and we spent 2 years in our basement writing a charter application. There were lots of ups and downs. We traveled out to Google. I had an event, excuse me, at Google where I was doing some facilitation with HBCU presidents, and I came back to the hotel. My wife went out there with me, and she was eating chicken wings. We're from Buffalo. Buffalo chicken wings with blue cheese only. We only eat it with blue cheese in Buffalo. And a Manhattan or an old fashioned. And I said, uh-oh, boo, what's wrong? She said, well, they pushed back on the charter and they tried to deny us. I said, we don't take no as an answer. Only thing that we take is you're not ready yet, but we accept yeses. So we pushed back to the district and they said, okay, well, we'll allow you to revise the application, which meant that we had to write another 1,000 pages. That's what revise meant. You're gonna redo this application. So we redid the application. We sat for another capacity interview after we went through the entire process, and then we were approved on 6/6 of 2019. We got our charter, but then it's that thing called funding. As a K-8 charter school, where are we gonna put these babies? How are we gonna pay for a principal? So on our anniversary, we went to Nevada, we went to Vegas to a charter school conference, and it was crazy because everything happens for a reason. I don't know what the earthquake had to play in that part, what part the earthquake had, but if you remember, a few years ago, there was an earthquake in California, and there were tremors in Vegas. I literally woke up in the hotel. My wife was like, can you just be still so I can sleep? I'm like, that's not me, boo. We literally, all the men run outside in the hotel, and we're like this. Then we look at each other, and all the wives are like, get back in the room and stand so nothing falls on you. We're like, oh, okay. I'm sorry, I digress, but that moment was crazy. At that, we got to the conference. We said, hey, listen, here's the play. You go left, I go right, and we're gonna talk to all these folks who give out money. We had to get over 100 no's just to get one maybe. Got to the table, that individual, he said, and it's also a lesson in when you speak to individuals, just because you're talking to that one person, there's also other people listening. Because the individual I was talking to, he was telling me no, and I just continued to tell my story. My wife was like, well, we printed these color brochures. If you're saying no, I need my color brochure back. So his boss stepped up and said, hey, I don't guarantee anything except that I'll read your entire charter, read the entire application. We got back from Vegas to Maryland, and he called me. I said, I read the entire charter. It looks really good. It's a golden ticket. Maryland is a really tough state, but let's see if I can get you connected. Got us connected with an investor who drove down on a holiday weekend from New York, met us in our basement. We were absolutely transparent and vulnerable about our situation, that we were all family that was doing this charter. We were a K-8. We maxed out at 900 students, what we wanted to do. I think less than a week later, he gave us ultimately $26 million to open up our 74,000 square foot facility in Lanham, Maryland. And then God said, we got one more for you. 2020 was the height of COVID, so we opened up 100% virtual in 2020, K-5 with 600 students. We add a grade each year, and right now, K-7, we have 800 students in our building, and next year we will have 900 and no more. Next year at 900 is the capacity. So what got me into this, my piece of that, again, is Black Queen energy, my wife coming home. But as well, I have invested, and I've been an investor since 1999 in the stock market, and I wanted to get children like this, scholars like this, involved into the stock market. So we added a financial education component because individuals talk about closing the achievement gap, but not enough folks are talking about closing the wealth gap. So every single scholar that comes to our school, we help foster them getting a stock account where they start investing in the live stock market in kindergarten, and we give out over $20,000 to $30,000 in scholarship to students every single year.
Beautiful. And right on cue, for Principal Mo, we have our students from T.H.R.I.V.E. Academy. Welcome. And we got to live part of the T.H.R.I.V.E. story yesterday by visiting the schools. So what I'd like you to do, Principal Mo, is talk about how your school community, because I think you've got a great community, how are they engaged as a school community in school choice?
I think. Well, good morning, first, everyone. Good morning. I feel like I'm with friends. Good to see you guys again. Preferably, everyone enjoyed their trip yesterday. Good morning to my young people. Hi, Jordan. I'm so excited Jordan came to school today. So I put out an email yesterday just saying that the high schoolers could either have a virtual learning day or they could show up at school by 7:30. They usually have to be at school until between 8 and 8:30. And so these young people thought it not robbery to show up an hour before they actually had to be there when they could have stayed at home sleeping in their beds. To come hang out, and I hyped it in the email. I was like, this is gonna be a great opportunity for our young people to sit with people that are leaders, that are doing excellent things. And so, and I think for me, them showing up this morning answers the question of how we're a proponent in school choice, that we have the support. And I'm not gonna say we don't have issues with like PTO. I had a parent yesterday ask me, you know, Miss Monica, do we have a PTO? I wanna be active. I'm like, y'all always blow that same wolf ticket, and then there's more teachers there than parents, okay? And so, but I think that the way that we advocate for school choice is to create opportunities for our young people to get out in the community, to be around other people that are influencing change, to ask questions that they don't always get to ask questions about, to be exposed to people that they wouldn't have otherwise met, and through them, because we live in a generation where the children making the decisions, even though it doesn't make sense to me. I didn't have choices in anything when I was growing up in my house. It was, my mom was like, I say you do. That's it. Period. That's it. That's it. But I do know that if I can get my young people excited about something, they go home, they tell their parents that they want to come, and their parents move hell and high water to make it happen. And so one of the ways that we advocate for school choice is to empower our young people to be articulate, to be able to explain and see the benefit of being in a private school, the benefit of being somewhere where people are invested, and then they do the advocating for us. They go home and tell their parents, like, no, I want to go. No, I can't be virtual today, but I want to go to the Black Leaders Summit. No, Ms. Monica said this is a good thing. This is what we should do. I want to go on their enrichment trip. Yeah, I have a basketball tournament this weekend, but I'm willing to miss it because Principal Mo's going to take us 3 days to Tennessee, and she said it's going to be crazy, you know? And so I think if we approach things, sometimes we have to approach things from the back end, and even when I'm completing mazes, I always start at the end and work my way back instead of coming in the forward direction. So I think that we have to engage young people, realizing that young people influence parent choice more than grown people do. It's easier for me to get a parent to say yes to something via their child than it is for me to call them. I can send 20 emails about the same thing, help me Lord. But if I tell one of these students, hey, on your last exam, you're gonna get 5 points. If your guardian comes to the PTO meeting, you're gonna get extra credit. That room is packed out. Like these children, when they're taught how to articulate and communicate effectively, have the ability to impact the things that we're trying to change and advocate for. How much more powerful is it for a young person to stand up at a board meeting and say, listen, I've been bullied. This is my experience, than necessarily their mom or their dad or their guardian. You know, it's easy to ignore a grown person. It is. It is. And as Ms. Woods said, like, you know, the lady on the board was sitting there filing her nails while she's talking, right? But she's not going to file her nails with one of these young people standing up there with a black eye looking like they just got out of Vietnam War. It demands attention. And I think if we train and teach our young people how to capitalize on their presence and their voices, like, they come from an ancestry that used their voice when they had nothing else to use, right? And so we teach them how to tap into just the presence of you causes impact and change. And if we teach them how to capitalize on those moments and to be in the right place at the right time, dressed the right way, speaking the way that you need to speak, and articulating and using your voice for your community, that's the game changer. Like, that's the missing factor. That all of us adults in this room, we have degrees and we have all of this, but young people have a power that is just unparalleled. It's just unparalleled. And so that's what we try to do. We try to teach our young people how to use their voice for good instead of for foolishness, for lack of better terms.
Love it, love it. Thank you. When we have all embarked on this road of education freedom, you know, we're going to hit some obstacles. There's going to be some battles. And Janelle, you were telling me about a fight you've been having in Arizona. Tell us about the SOS.
It's on now? Okay. So we have been working with Governor Ducey, AFC, and A for Arizona, different organizations to promote the expansion of the Empowerment Scholarship Account. So Arizona has an Empowerment Scholarship Account, but initially it was conditioned. It was conditioned based on whether or not the parent could prove that their student went to a D.R.I.V.E school, or that they had some sort of learning disability or some sort of need that was over and beyond what they could get in the public school, so they had to qualify. So this particular House Bill 2853, we were looking at expanding that where they didn't have to meet all that criteria, that just a parent wanted to move their child because it was the best thing for their child, that they should have the ability to do so, free from all the different barriers and hoops that they need to go through. So I became, I was called in to speak to that, and I said, yes, I'd be happy to come to hearings, to speak, and I did that. Well, I ended up running for office. I just ran for state senate in our primary because I felt that, I needed to show that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure we create these safe and supportive environments for our children, and sometimes it means you go into some sort of political office. And I wanted to help other mothers be comfortable enough if I pushed them to go do something like that, they do it. So I had to demonstrate. So I went through it rough. This group called Save Our Schools is a group of white parents that have, white mothers in particular, they are focused on saving the school system, the public school system. And anyone who comes against them, so they believe, they are going to do whatever they can to smear you, and they did. They came for me, they said I was defunding public schools and all this extra stuff. And they created this narrative and made me an enemy. But I came forth and I said, I'm not here to save a school, I'm here to save our children. And that was my focus. And I said, I'm not here to defund public schools, I'm here to shut down a system that gives adults permission to behave in a certain way that adversely impacts our black children. That's what I'm against. So if your public school system is doing what it's supposed to do, the adults in that space are behaving in a way that creates a safe and supportive and learning environment for our black children, we're all good. But if you are behaving in a way that your system allows you to continue to negatively impact our children, you got a problem with us. And so we continue to push for that. I did not care. I stayed the same. What I find is I ran as a Democrat, and the Democratic Party was against me focusing on the ESA. They were against me focusing on parent choice and student choice, and I did not care. I stayed consistent along the way. And they came for me every which way, but I didn't care about that because it's about all of you. And I know my focus, and I don't care about whether or not I got in office or not. What I cared about was that God gave me a platform to speak the truth on your behalf at a different level that I hadn't been at before. And so sometimes we got to do that. It's okay. I didn't make it through the primary, but guess what? My point got across. And thank goodness more and more parents heard it. They pushed for it. We had a whole nother parent group show up that went and countered SOS. When Governor Ducey signed that bill into law, they wanted to counter it. They went on, got petitions to get it on a referendum to come out against it. They went all out. But another parent stepped in. I had never even heard of her before. She said she heard me speak. She said, I got two parents together, and we said, we're going to go to every place where they're collecting signatures, and we're going to obstruct them. We're going to block parents from getting to sign that, and we're going to tell parents the truth about ESA. They did that. 1,000 mothers got activated all across the state, Paul. And they went to every place that those women were collecting signatures, and they blocked it. They blocked it. And I got a chance to meet her with Governor Ducey when we finally realized they didn't have enough signatures to block the bill, and now it's a law. Yay! That's what we do.
Congratulations.
That's what we do.
And really just stick to your principles.
That's
I think it's so neat that you decided, even though most of your fellow Democrats are against what you're advocating, that you're not just going to flip to go to where the crowd is that agrees with you. So keep up that work. Bernita, it looks like you were feeling what she was saying.
Yeah, most definitely.
What's the current battle that you've got going, what you're
Well,
fighting for?
Well, so let me go back to a little bit what she was saying. People keep talking about this traditional public school war against choice, right? Like, I'm always reminding people, you do know charter schools wouldn't have had to exist if your public schools didn't suck, right?
Right.
Like, you do know choice would not have had to exist if you were not failing our children, and then our children wouldn't have had to go to charter schools. Like, while your children, most of your children, you superintendents, most of your children were going to parochial schools while you were consistently failing our children in traditional public schools. But now that black people want to stand up, right, now that you hear black voices talking about choice and more choice, then it's a problem. When white moms and white dads were sitting at their schools saying, I think we want a different type of system, it was not a problem. But when black families stood up and black founders are standing up, now it's an attack on traditional public schools. No, your schools suck, and they still suck, right? Like, I'm not gonna even hold back. I don't want to be apologetic about whether I believe Democratic or Republican. I have not agreed with more Republicans in my life than since this pandemic happened, right? Like, I would turn into a Republican, but then I remember why I'm not. But so either way it go, right? Like, there are some things that happen that are like where our children are lacking, and they keep telling us, give us time. Give us time. I don't have time when my young black and brown boys are dying every day because you pushed them out of school, because you set them in offices. We've had IEPs. I've been in schools where I've seen IEP students because the teacher did not want to handle them. They were in the back doing coloring sheets. What the heck is your problem? And this is a federal document. This is a federal process that you are supposed to be keeping. And then when a parent stands up, now they become the problematic parent. Right? And so parents are saying all over the country, now I have to do like a little bit of a shout out. So the National Parent Union poll just came out recently, and it literally says that parents are fighting for more choice. And guess what? They don't want the government making that choice for them. They want more alternative options. They want to be able to send their children to Thrive schools. Parents who can't afford to send their children, they want the funding. And they feel like the funding should follow their child. Absolutely. Right? Because guess what? When you see a child actually thriving, right? Like the name of the school, when you see a child surviving and going beyond survival to thriving and learning skills, we're going to have a better future. That's right. And we can get out of our head that these children are the future. They the right now. Like, if you get in these babies' heads and get to talking to them and get them to guide and understand that they have power in their voices, you will see some phenomenal things if we just listen, but we the ones know everything, right? Like traditional public schools and all of that know everything. And they're like, just keep bringing your kids. We gonna get it together eventually. Go on about your business. I'm not bringing my child nowhere. Like, we got a shirt that said, my children ain't coming into your school to prison pipeline.
There you go.
Literally, they not. And people look at us like, well, Bernita, somebody asked me a question a couple of weeks ago. A gentleman interviewing me from Harvard said, well, how do you feel being a black mom in most spaces where kind of white people really agree more? And, you know, do you feel like that loses your credit with black people? Why? I'm blackety black all day. I'm black when I'm in that room. Right. I can't erase this, right? And so, literally, when I'm in that space, do you think I'm gonna make change only staying with my own people? That's right. It's not happening. Because guess what? Y'all the ones with the privilege and the power. Mm-hmm. So if I can change your mind to get you to understand why you need to be supporting the work that I'm doing, then I need to be in those spaces. And I make frenemies on purpose all day. Just because I know that you might have a connect, so connect me. Right. And I challenge people all the time. Like, I'm going to need you to show up. You say you want to help kids, prove it. Don't play with me. Don't come talking about some, oh, we really would like to help the marginalized children. No, I need you to help them.
Help them.
And you're going to help them with these dollars, right? So that's my stance.
Pass that mic over to Shomari.
Come on, Shomari.
All right. The title of this panel is Putting Policies into Practice. Policy is always, to me, it's weaponized sometimes.
Absolutely.
What, especially since you have a charter school and you deal with levels of policy that we can't even imagine, what's been the toughest policy issue that you've faced since getting your charter?
Good question. Can I back up and give some context to
Yeah.
that first? I've asked for a slide to be put up. In school, I'm a visual and hands-on learner.
There we go.
All right, so taking a look at this slide, right, when we start talking about activism and advocacy, not activism versus advocacy, right? So when you start talking about activism, which we good at, right? We gonna grab the markers, the signs, we in the streets, we in these streets. Fist in the air, kneeling, walking, we bout that life with activism. And activism for equity is right there, right? On that far right one. So that equity for activism is taking the actual boxes that match the individuals to make sure that they can see the game. That the game that is going on for those less fortunate can make sure that they can see the game. However, when you start talking about advocacy and policy implementation, policy writing and policy getting passed, we start talking about liberation. And then you start to question things at a higher level. Why do we need a gate in the first place? Think about that. So liberation, and now from my activism to be able to stand there and give them the boxes, to now my advocacy to removing the gate so I don't need the boxes anymore, to now it's just a free-for-all. It's liberation. We can go and do what we need to do. And in doing what we need to do and removing that gate, what's going to happen is we're going to uncover more opportunities for improvement, because it's cyclical. It's continuous improvement. So what activism to advocacy means is teaching people how to treat us, period. However, policy doesn't just stop there. What goes along with policies is procedures, because I can write the policy and we can have the policy, it can get passed, it can be stone cold. But if you don't know how to implement the policy, if you don't know how to translate the policy, then what good is the policy going to do? I'm gonna use a healthcare reference because it's one I think we can all understand. The policy in an operating room is don't chew gum in the operating room. You probably don't want your doctor, your surgeon, to chew gum in the operating room. That's the policy. Hey, doctor, don't chew gum in the operating room, right? So the doctor comes in and he leaves the gum under his tongue. I'm not chewing it. I'm not going to chew the gum. I'm going to actually put it under the table and touch it with my fingers. That's the policy, though. He stood true to the policy. So what we have to do is write procedures that match the policy, right? So the policy is don't chew gum in the operating room. But the procedure is doctor, surgeon, as you enter the operating room, throw it out with your right hand, wash your hands, glove up, and then enter the OR room. So now you followed the policy and the instructions for implementation. So what we have to do is get to that activism and advocacy to make sure we're passing policies with procedures to teach people how to treat us. I just wanted to give you all that context. Now, that in answering the question now, one of the most difficult, Maryland is one of the toughest states for charter laws. It's absolutely bad. Let's just be frank. Which a slight digression is the philanthropic efforts are also anemic, and that's no surprise, right? So you don't have good charter laws, you don't have good choice laws, and people aren't typically putting dollars there. One of the specific things that Legends Charter School in Lanham, Maryland deals with, we're unlike DC or Florida where we have autonomy. Our teachers are union teachers, and the authorizer is the county. So wait a minute, what does that mean? I told you I'm in school, I'm like a hands-on learner. I like these off, colorful examples. That's like they are McDonald's approving a Wendy's. Why do y'all need a square hamburger? We got this, right? So one of the most difficult things that we face is, well, you know what? Your teachers, even though it's Legends Charter School and you do square hamburgers, we like round ones. So can you cut your edges a little bit? And then their policy that leaks in as well, the teachers are actually our union teachers that report to you, but they're also Prince George's County public school system teachers. So guess what? They go through our administrative procedure as opposed to your administrative procedure. So what does that mean? So if I have an opportunity for improvement with a teacher that I need to coach potentially out of my school, I don't have the autonomy to do it? No, because we like circle hamburgers. We like Big Macs, even though you want to be a Wendy's. So one of the largest things that we're facing is pushing against, which we may need federal legislation when it boils down to it, because take a look. Maryland, as we just talked about, is one of the most anemic places for philanthropic efforts and one of the worst places for charter laws. Florida is robust, and Nebraska doesn't even have choice. So is it time now for us to talk about federal legislation to have a ground floor? What does it look like? Now, I'm obviously biased because I'm a charter school. When I say choice, I'm talking about charter schools, specifically in this example. But choice doesn't only mean charter schools. It means private schools. It means homeschools. It means micro schools. It means all of the above. But until we fundamentally understand my aforementioned commentary about activism and advocacy for policy to teach people how to treat us, we're going to have issues, team.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to take at least one question, maybe two. Anyone with a question? I can't believe it. Processing. Well, this has been an absolute wonderful panel. I'm left now with a vision of cutting edges off of square hamburgers. But thank you, panel. I think we've got another, I think we have Steve Perry coming up next, so just stay tuned and stay there.